Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, the director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we'll discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue, and finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. This month's topic is gender dysphoria. Let's now welcome this week's guest. Will you please introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Jennifer Roback-Morse. I'm founder and president of the Ruth Institute. The Ruth Institute is an international interfaith coalition to defend the family and build a civilization of love.
So Dr. Morse, so today we're talking about gender dysphoria. We're talking about transgender issues. Why is this a pro-life issue for the church?
Well, all of the issues around sexual identity become pro-life issues because they're part of the overall sexual revolution. And the sexual revolution is a big thing, and the life issues that we properly understand, like abortion and euthanasia and those kinds of things, those are one aspect of the sexual revolution, the part of the sexual revolution which says you get to have whatever sex you want, nothing bad will happen. And really the business of the state is to make it so your sex life is as convenient as possible for you. You know, that's our social goal now, you know. So that's one part of the sexual revolution. But the other part of the sexual revolution is that the human body is really not very important. The gendered nature of the human body, the fact that we're male and female, this has always been contested by sexual revolutionaries. You know, at first it was men and women are really the same and everything that looks like they're different, that's just socially constructed, and so we can reconstruct it. Matter of fact, not only can we must reconstruct society so that all differences between men and women go away. You know, that was kind of the first round. And now we're to the point where we're saying, well, it's more than that. It's not only constructed, you can personally deconstruct it, not just society, but personally you can deconstruct whether you're male or female. And so there's nothing substantial or important or significant about the basic, what normal people would think is the basic biological fact that we are a mammal species with male and female, and that's how we reproduce, and that's how all mammals do it. But we don't like that fact anymore, you know, so we're trying to, dare we say it, neuter that fact and overwrite that biological fact now by saying that any individual can rewrite the sex of their body and nothing bad will happen, you know, and that the idea is that we allow the individual to express their will however they want, and the business of society is to support them with law and medical technology so that they can have whatever gender identity expression that they want. So this attack on the body is related to the attack on human fertility, you know, which is saying the sexual act is something that is fun and pleasurable, but has no particular social significance, no particular moral significance. So we can override all of that too, you know. So all of these things, what the sexual revolution, the link that holds all these pieces together is the discontent with our embodied nature and the way that we reproduce as a mammal species. That's what we're in rebellion against and trying to override. So that's why it really is, philosophically and practically, it is a pro-life issue to help people understand that no one is born in the wrong body, you know, and that, of course, in a way, that's a theological statement, you know, to say, oh, you were born in the wrong body. People are talking like that. They're making a profound philosophical and theological claim that has no basis in fact whatsoever, you know. And so I think as Catholics, we're not freaked out over the human body. The incarnation is just fine. You know, God took on a human body. It must be okay. And he took on a male body, and he had a mom who had a female body. And, you know, so we're not freaked out over the body. And so we are the ones that really need to be on the forefront of talking about this issue in a sensible way, because a lot of people are being harmed by the misunderstanding of the sex of the body. And that's what we're confronting. Some of the things that we're seeing are just heartbreaking. And I'm sure you've interviewed some of the people who've been through the mill. I mean, and they have really been through the ringer.
Right, you're right, Dr. Morse. I love how you articulated that as well. So you brought up the medical community, even how laws are supporting that. So let's say, you know, a child or a teenager, right, is expressing some gender confusion and saying, hey, I'm starting to wonder if I'm the gender that I'm the other gender. If I'm a boy, even though you think I'm a girl. And the parents have that and they're struggling with that. Naturally, they would think, oh, well, I think I should probably turn to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a counselor or something, right? So if you do that, what is likely to happen? Where's the medical community doing?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, one of the things I show in my book, The Sexual State, which is really about how the sexual revolution has been a creation of the power elites. One of the things that you see is all the professions have been corrupted by the sexual revolution. And if you're a pro-life sidewalk counselor, you know that the medical profession is corrupted, because they say things that are medically incorrect about human life before birth. And they say all kinds of things that are untrue. And these things are taught in medical school, and things are said in counseling that turn out to be not true, So there are a number of things. I think most of your pro-life listeners are aware that the medical profession, the legal profession, the therapeutic community, the mainstream of those professions are all in for the sexual revolution. So when the subject is, what is my child's body and what is the sex of their body and what's the significance of the sex of their body, those same professions are now compromised on those questions too. And so if you go to a doctor, I would strongly recommend that you do not go to any medical place that says gender clinic on it. Anything that says gender clinic, you got to stay away from those people, because those clinics have been financed by wealthy foundations that are promoting the trans agenda. And they very quickly will fast track the kids onto changes to their body, often completely experimental changes to the child's body that have not been tested, where we know there are serious risks that are not reversible, not fully reversible. When you're talking about amputating healthy body parts, that cannot be reversed. But even some of the hormones, we have good reason to think that those hormones are harmful, actively harmful to the child. And so you got to stay away from those places. We also know now, I've been hearing from sidewalk counselors who standing out in front of Planned Parenthood clinics that cross-sex hormones and transgender kinds of medications are now a cash cow for Planned Parenthood. And we have heard that a young person can go into a Planned Parenthood and on the same day walk out with a prescription for a cross-sex or transgender kind of hormone, something that will upset the natural hormonal balance of their bodies, which you normally don't do. Normally, if you go to an endocrinologist, the problems with hormones are, well, how do we get them back into their natural balance? How do we get things organized? But no, the transgender medical treatments, if you want to call it that, the use of hormones is to disrupt what is natural and replace it with something that is of the opposite sex of the body. So whether it's a puberty blocker, whether it's a cross-sex hormone, they're being handed these prescriptions with very little in the way of screening, to say, is this really what the issue is? Is this really the right thing for this person to do?
Well, yeah, we had just heard that from our other speakers earlier, that Planned Parenthood is doing that. Is there even an age thing on that? It depends on by the state, like as long as you're 18 or if you're 16, or it doesn't matter how old because of the laws and practices that have been in place around contraceptive use, I think that a lot of, I don't know the law state by state, but I know that in some places it's certainly the case that that a young person, a minor, can get these kind of hormones without their parents' permission, and in some cases without their parents even knowing it. There are stories of the schools doing this, the school nurse, doing the back door without the parents knowing it. Well, that is a follow-on to getting them contraception without their parents knowing it, a follow-on to them getting abortions without their parents knowing about it. The infrastructure, if you want, the social infrastructure for getting that done is already in place and has been established by the pro-contraception forces, the pro-abortion forces. And so that whole mechanism is just being pressed into service in a lot of cases for this new purpose. So, Dr. Morse, you probably wrote books, to answer this question, but nonetheless, so it seems to me, I guess it seems to you, right, how obvious would be, even without Catholic perspective on the incarnation, on theology, even to say if someone is expressing some discontent with their biological gender, even if you believe that at some point that might be the right thing to do, to physically change that, it seems common sense to not jump there, right? And to at least begin with say, okay, is counseling in order right now? Is looking at their environment in order right now to see if maybe there's something going on that would make this temporary, right? And yet the medical community is jumping right into nothing less than immediate full acceptance that if there's some confusion going on, it's because the reality is that they were born in the wrong body. How did that happen?
So that tells you, that's your clue, Bob. That's your clue that this has nothing to do with medicine or science, and that it has to do with ideology. When it happens just like that, with so little questions asked, that's an ideology, because that's not how doctors normally act. If it's any other condition, they're not going to act like that. And neither will therapists, operate on that type of assumption. So that's your clue that you're in the grip of a powerful ideology. And so then you have to ask, well, what is this ideology about? What is this ideology doing for people, for the people who hold it? But part of it is that they're creating this kind of fantasy world where the body doesn't matter very much. You're not constrained by the body. You can be whoever you want, and you can do whatever you want. And all these bad things that people were scaring you with, they're not really going to happen. You're not really going to get pregnant. You're not really going to get STD. Oh, if you get an STD, you can cure it. If you have a baby, it doesn't. You're not really committed to the child's other parent for life, because you can switch out the partners and the child will be fine. All this kind of stuff. It's all fantasy, you see, and it's a fantasy that empowers the people who are already in power. It empowers people who want to act on their impulses, right? And then all the people who are making money off of cleaning up the damage, those people are empowered, right? So if you can convince people that being born in the wrong body is a thing, well, you can make money correcting that. And they will be customers for life. If you can convince somebody that, Dr. Morse, you're really a man, and we've got the pills that'll make you feel that way, and the shots and the treatments that are going to make you feel like a man, then you got to be on those for the rest of your life, And so there's now evidence. There's been a couple of investigative reporters who have looked very closely and followed the money, that these big foundations that are putting money into setting up children's gender clinics all around the country, those foundations are financed by people who have close ties to medical devices or pharmaceutical industry. And some of them are themselves living a transgender lifestyle, I suppose you could say. A man who calls himself Jennifer and stuff like that. So they have their own disordered life that they're living, but they're also making a lot of money off of promoting it. And this is undeniable. I have never seen anybody even attempt to deny that this is the case. And the other thing is, we know this about Planned Parenthood. We know this about the divorce industry. We know this about a number of aspects of the sexual revolution, that there are people making money either promoting the thing, selling abortions or whatever, or cleaning up the mess. So in the case of divorce, divorce attorneys make a lot of money off the immediate divorce, but also managing child custody over the lifetime of that marriage. Then they got to manage all that. The counselors and the financial advisors and the court officers and all these people who end up involved in the life of a family that's gone through a divorce, that those people are completely off the table. If you get married and stay married, they're not even a thing. They're unimaginable that somebody would have that kind of influence in your life. And so that pattern of people making a living out of other people's family breakdown or discontent with their body and stuff like that, that pattern is repeated here in the whole gender dysphoria, gender disruption industry, could you call it that? The kind of the whole body of people who are trying to convince little children that, just because you're a boy today doesn't mean you're going to grow up to be a man. You can be whatever you want. Convincing little children of this. When you're a child, that kind of stability of personality, that's a developmental task. For a 3-year-old to realize I'm a 3-year-old boy named Bobby today, and I'll be a 4-year-old boy named Bobby a year from now, and I'm going to grow up to be a man named Robert. That's a task. And a little undeveloped child, they haven't done that yet. And so we've got powerful ideologues in the schools and on TV and cartoons promoting the idea that no, your body is not a thing. Your identity has nothing to do with your physicality. And the fact that you have XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes in every single cell of your body, that's not very important. Don't worry about it. There are people making money off of that.
So, Dr. Moore, so we've talked to a few people as well who have for a time lived the transgender lifestyle, or for parents who are trying to deal with the community and feeling like the treatment available for their children has actually not been helpful. Studies that have shown that are being discounted now, but anyway, of giving certain kinds of treatment, environmental, exposure to children who have some gender confusion, and seeing that the rate of success of having them then accept their gender is actually very high. So
Right.
all this is out there, and yet the people who are living transgender themselves, there are apparently enough of them that agree with the people who are making money off of it to also very loudly proclaim that this is what we need to do and this is where I need to go. How is it that people who themselves, right, are experiencing the hormones and the treatment and the lack of counseling are themselves lockstep with the people who are making all the money off of it?
Well, that's kind of a dark question when you put it that way, So, and anyway, as you can see, there are multiple facets to this question, and there are multiple places where a different path could be taken that we're specifically not taking. So if you look at somebody like Walt Heyer, he will tell you the source of his gender discomfort had to do with certain ways in which he was abused, had to do with an underlying mental illness that was not diagnosed. The desisters are the ones who are coming out and saying, you know what, this wasn't really the issue, and changing my body didn't really make me happy, and trying to live this way didn't make me happy. And rather than listen to those people and go, whoa, maybe we should slow this all down and have a year-long waiting period or whatever, those people are instead marginalized, and they are told to sit down and shut up. And again, that's your clue that you're not dealing with healthcare or medicine or therapy. You're dealing with an ideology. Because if you were dealing with healthcare, you'd say, oh, this is an unusual case. We should really study it and figure out what's going on.
So what about, let's a little bit about the therapeutic community, right? So if your typical counselor, right? If you bring someone to a counselor who doesn't have the license to give you drugs, right? Or do surgery or anything like that.
Right.
You're talking to children who are expressing some kind of gender confusion or something like that. What are you typically going to get today? And where are they going today?
Well, that profession is right now in some upheaval, I would say, because there are plenty of counselors out there who would be happy to say what you just said, which is, let's talk about this. Tell me what's going on. And is there anything that you can point to that made you feel this way? And, oh, somebody did do something to you. Well, let's talk about that. I'm a mandated reporter. There are all sorts of things that could be done there. And there are plenty of therapists out there who'd be willing to do it. But they're scared, especially the ones who would say, if you pray about this and if you go to church and you calm down and you have a good chance of succeeding, that I can help you, your family can help you, your church community can help you, Jesus can help you. That kind of therapist is really, really scared right now, right? Because of the legal environment, which is saying no conversion therapy, which was put in place to prevent people from being converted from homosexuality to not homosexuality. That same line of thought is being put into place to keep people from saying, you're not really transgender, you're just confused. That therapists are afraid to talk like that, even if in fact the person is just confused, So it's a very difficult environment for people. I would not recommend that parents just go to the phone book and pick out a therapist. I would not recommend that you let your insurance company pick your therapist. You need to do some real serious checking, because there are people so I just described one end of the spectrum of people who would like to do strictly talk therapy and counsel people to accept who they are and to say your body's fine. At the other extreme, you've got people who are all in. You've got the therapeutic part of the branch of the therapeutic community that's all in for changing the body and for saying that your body is wrong. If we fix your body, your mind is going to be fine. And if you end up with that kind of therapist, they will have a tendency to fast track you. And that's the situation where parents are losing control of their kids, where the state is coming in, particularly if there's a dispute between the parents and a divorce happens. And now you got custody, you've got all of this legal machinery at stake. So, I would really tell you to really be very cautious about who you choose a therapist. And I would say to husband and wife, if you see this in one of your children, that you as a couple get yourselves together as much as you can as a team, because any breakdown between the two of you is going to turn very ugly very quickly, and neither of you are going to end up being happy with the outcome. Even if one of you gets the state to side with you, you're not really going to be happy with the outcome. It's far better if you work on your marriage and keep yourselves together so that you don't have these third parties coming into your family and really taking over. Those cases are out there, and it's a nightmare for the parents.
And in some cases, even if the parents are together, could take the parents away and go with the grandparents because of this ideology that, look, if this 16-year-old wants to go through puberty hormone therapy and the parents won't allow it, then the state has the obligation to take care of the child. I mean, that has happened.
I keep being surprised, and I'm going to say this. I don't know if anybody will pick up this ball, but it surprises me that the insurance companies don't get more involved here. Because you would think that if you're the insurance company and you're paying for treatments, that you would want to exhaust all the inexpensive options first, before you go to the really expensive things. And so you would think that they would want X number of counseling sessions and, this kind of proof or that kind of documentation or so on. And I think that's not the case. It's been a few years since I looked into that, but when I did, it was during the Obama administration, but they were very passive about it. You need a letter or something, They're a little more aggressive with some kinds of treatments that are expensive. You think I don't know. I'm just going to throw that out there. Maybe there's somebody in the insurance business who can deal with that or knows something about it.
That does make you wonder. When you wonder about assisted suicide, it makes more sense that the insurance company would buy into that one, right?
Right.
Assisted suicide is cheaper. But in this case, the sensible, let's try some counseling, let's try talking, let's see if there's some environmental thing, something that happened in your past that might be helping you think that way. That is immensely cheaper than puberty blocking hormones for life.
Or expensive surgery that then has all kinds of ramifications a lot of times.
How is it that they have been pressured in some way to accept the more expensive option? That's a terrific question. I wonder if anybody knows the answer to that. So you started on this a little bit, right? Be very careful who you choose. But if you are a parent and a child of yours, particularly if it's a child, and they're saying, I think I'm the other gender. I mean, what would you suggest parents should do?
So it depends on the age and how far the thing has gone. If you've got teenagers, you've got to be really careful about the internet. There is a thing called rapid onset gender dysphoria, okay? And rapid onset gender dysphoria is something that never existed until, 10 years ago or something like that. There have been diagnoses of gender dysphoria for a long time, as long as there's been a DSM, I suppose. But mostly it was adult men who were coming forward and saying, I think I'm a woman, or I'm not comfortable, or whatever. Now it's teenage girls, enormous number of teenage girls. And what seems to be happening is they get on the internet in a little chat room and they're all talking about their problems, a lot of which are normal teenage girl angst type of problems. And somebody swoops in and convinces them that the solution to their problem would be that they're really a boy. And that if they would just put on a breast binder so that their breasts didn't show, if they would just chop off their hair, if they would just go onto these hormones, if they would just do all these things to get them out of being female, that would solve their problems. And so that rapid onset gender dysphoria, that is something you got to watch for. If you're seeing that, take a long vacation out in the woods where there's no internet connection. And I'm not kidding. And there are families that have moved to get their kids out of their current friend group so that they can start over with a new group of friends that will be more accepting and not be promoting this kind of stuff. But since it's on the internet, moving away doesn't necessarily help, So what to do? I can tell you a bunch of things to not do or to be on the lookout for, but what to positively do is more complicated, especially if the undeveloped teen or preteen brain gets the thing going and gets a little loop going. A lot of times that's really hard to interrupt. And that is what you're dealing with. You need to understand they aren't really a boy. They aren't really trapped in the wrong body. No one is born in the wrong body. Everybody has the right body for them. And the idea that we should be promoting as an ideology that you might have the wrong body, that is really dark. And we just need left, right, Catholic, not Catholic. Can we just stop doing that? That's just so destructive to people's sense of identity and self and everything else.
I'm sure that, as you say, counselors who would be willing to discuss what's happening environmentally and socially, that is making them think this way are a little nervous. So there's not going to
Right,
be some publicized list, right, somewhere that
right.
parents can go to. Here's a counselor I can talk to. So we know that does not exist, and we can't point people to that. But maybe if you went to a pastor or went to somebody that say, hey, do you know a counselor that's
Mm-hmm.
at our parish or that is Catholic that I could talk to, but definitely don't open up the phone book.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, no. And the other thing people need to be aware of is that you've probably heard this term, the cancel culture, where there's so much social pressure to conform to certain kinds of things. One of the most painful things that happens in these families is that their community will turn on them. That people will say, oh, you should really be nicer to your daughter who you thought was your son. You should really be nicer and more supportive, so your friends and your neighbors in the school community, all these people can swoop in on you. And so I think it's important to try to be supportive of the natural family, and the natural body and so on. If you know of parents who are going through this, for crying out loud, don't pile on, and try to be supportive of them if they're trying to slow the process down, or because that extra social pressure that people are applying, that's very painful and takes a tremendous toll on people. And I think the average person doesn't realize how much you actually could be helpful if you would try to be realistic and try to be supportive of the parents who are trying to keep their kid in their body.
And what if you're a parent, let's say a teenager, and this most likely, I guess these days, it seems like it's fairly common with teenage girls, I've heard as well. So let's say your daughter comes to you and says, hey, mom and dad, I'm a boy. I want you to start calling me Mark and refer to me as he and refer to me as your son. For the sake of peace, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
in immediate sense, would you advise that a parent go along with that kind of a thing, or do they need to refuse because that's just a slippery slope? How do you think a parent should?
I think that's the place where the rubber hits the road, and that's where the child is coming in and giving you the ultimatum that if you want to be my parent, this is what you have to do. And you need to be aware there are people out there who will say, well, I'll be your glitter family. Okay, and being your glitter family means that I will take you in. When your parents are so mean to you and don't understand you, you can come be with us, we'll take care of you and, all of this kind of thing. So that's out there. That's a real thing. But I do think that's not a reason to say, I'm changing your name or I'm going to call you by an incorrect pronoun. I'm not going to do that. We love you and we want you to be here and we're going to help you and so on and so forth. But that's where it happens. That's where the crisis will come in the family. And one person will say, I can't stand it. I'm going to keep peace by doing what she wants. And the other parents all, no, we really can't do this. It's hard. It's really hard. That's all I'm going to say. It's really hard. But I think here's what we should say as an adult community, that when somebody is coming into your family and saying to your child, your parents don't understand you, and I do. Come on over here with me. Your parents don't get it, and I get it. That is a very manipulative thing that is going on. And when they say, your child will commit suicide if you don't support them, that is a very manipulative thing to be doing. That's emotional manipulation. And how you deal with it, I don't know how you deal with it in each and every case. I'm not going to say what to do. But I am going to say, I think we need to name that this is what's going on.
Right. So, Dr. Morse, do you have anything, particularly perhaps for the podcast listeners, books, websites, whatever, for more education and more information on this topic?
So I think that some of the people that you've chosen to interview that are great resources for it. Dr. Aaron Brewer and Lynn Meager, these are very good resources. Walt Heyer is a good resource. Dr. Michelle Cretella and the American College of Pediatricians she is very good on just going through the physical aspects of it and what these so-called treatments do, what the cross-sex hormones do, what the puberty blockers do, some of the consequences of the surgery and so on. So the American College of Pediatricians is also a very good resource. Dr. Cretella is good. And the person who's done the best reporting on this is a young man named Brandon Showalter, who writes for the Christian Post, which is an evangelical online publication. And he's the one who has interviewed a variety of desisters and parents and people who regret it, doctors who don't go along with the thing. He's the guy who's doing the most consistent reporting on this stuff. So as news happens, as new things come up, he's a good person to be following.
All right, terrific. Anything else you feel like I need to ask you wanted to make sure you brought up before we close out here today?
Well, I really want your pro-life audience just to be aware that there is a general process at work here that is linking all of the pieces of the sexual revolution together, and it all is top down. This is all, something from the top of society, the highly educated classes, professional classes, the government, the professions are pressing this stuff down onto everybody else. And with the transgender stuff, you can easily see that there is no grassroots movement in favor of transgenderism. It's all coming from the top down. And pro-lifers who know their pro-life history, are aware that that's how the abortion thing happened too. That was all a top-down thing, and it was ordinary folk who were fighting back against those things. And it's to this day, it's ordinary folk who are fighting back. So I just want people to see that connection, that it's all one giant thing. It's all run kind of the same way. And that's what I talk about in my book. And that's what we deal with over at the Ruth Institute. People should definitely come over to the Ruth Institute, sign up for our newsletter, watch our video podcast. We've got a video podcast series where I've interviewed a lot of these people that you're talking about, as well as a lot of the other things that are important to the marriage movement. So we would certainly be very, very happy to see the Cincinnati people come over and hang out with us. That'd be great.
Okay, so you mentioned one of your books, The Sexual State.
Yep.
By Dr. Jennifer Roback-Morse, and your website, the Ruth Institute. Lots of resources there. And if you go to our website, as always, at www.catholicaoc.org/beingprolife, you'll find all the resources also already listed on this topic. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today on the transgender issues, on gender confusion, gender ideology, and where it is that we're going in this country, and how it is that we can educate ourselves to better understand how we can truly help our brothers and sisters who are expressing some difficulty with their gender. Thanks for talking with us today.
So glad to do it. Thanks for doing it.
And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in on this episode of our Being Pro-Life series. Head to the website and view all the links that we talked about today at www.catholiccincinnati.org/being-pro-life. Thank you again for joining us today, and I look forward to being with you next time.